Hello everybody, my name is Simonian and I'm broadcasting out of London in the United Kingdom. Just going to be talking about Armenia today, but more in the more spiritual, esoteric side of Armenia, the Armenia that is not often talked about. The thing is, one of the things about Armenia is you don't often hear a lot about it. The only time you hear about Armenia is when is the time of the Armenian genocide memorials and times like that, where there is a mention in the news, or you see it a lot on social media, but everything else you don't hear much. I've often wondered about that. Why is it that Armenia, you don't hardly see Armenia in documentaries or travel programs, or all these kind of things, or even like the history of Armenia ever being taught in schools or colleges, or even mentioned, and even in museums, would you believe, sometimes Armenia is not even mentioned there, but it's more mentioned in terms of Sumeria or Babylon. And occasionally they call it from its original name, Urartu. So I often wondered, and the general consensus is because Armenia is a country that is not economically that wealthy, and doesn't have that kind of political presence in the world, so therefore it's hardly ever mentioned. But then even myself, just generally watching documentaries and things, and you see people traveling, you see them travel through Turkey, and then they go into Azerbaijan, or they go from Turkey to Georgia, or vice versa, but always Armenia is always left out. And I often wondered, and I think the answer to that was that Armenia is a very spiritual country, and my suspicion, or rather, I've basically, founded this idea that because a lot of initiated people from different so-called Messianic backgrounds or initiates, they go to Armenia. Also, the elite go to Armenia, and they go there to do ceremonies, rituals, mainly because Armenia is a highly charged or high vibrational country. So it's often left out, but there's also sacred objects that again is never talked about. Sacred objects like black alloy metals, pillars that were found, or like I said, sacred objects that you do find here and there in Yerevan Museum, and the other one in the Goris Museum, like small little carvings that no one understands how they were carved, because the actual metal itself, the metal alloy, cannot be cut or cannot be fashioned or drilled or anything, and it doesn't even leave a scratch. And also it's very, very heavy. So I've often wondered about this. So around 2014, I'd arranged what I thought was going to be a holiday, to be honest, but it ended up being a very educational experience, an expedition into Armenia and into the heartland of Armenia, into places where even many of the Armenian tourists don't even go, but I went with my wife, and we met a lovely family who were also experts in their own fields, scientists called Vazgen and Elena Gavorkian, and they showed us around. It was very, very interesting, but I tell you personally what happened to me. A few nights before we were going to fly out, I had a very strange or very amazing experience, because I had a dream that in my dream I was going to be led to a ceremonial place, which I was going with my teacher, and I saw from a distance, like on this hill, there was a fire and there were people circling the fire. And so I went up to the hill, and my teacher left me, and I carried on up, and I entered the circle. And then at that point, it was just like having strobe lights hitting you from all different directions. And what happened was I actually opened my eyes, from the actual sleep itself. I opened my eyes and I still saw the strobes hitting my face, even though my room was dark, and I was suddenly awakened by it. And then in my mind, I thought, oh, I'm being initiated. And I sort of closed my eyes and I just fell back to sleep. But then I didn't go back into that same dream. And because it was quite a prophetic dream, I wondered what it was about, because when I actually got to Armenia a few days later, and I sat down with Vazgen, and we were discussing, and he said, yeah, we had these seers, before you came, Ara, and basically the seers told us about your dream. So what was it about that I kind of understood was that a person can't just go to Armenia, in a sense, because it's a very sacred place. In many ways, to be connected to the land, you get connected like this, or you can actually go there and get connected physically. So I was kind of connected to the land in my dream. Also, another part of it is the fact that since I was a kid, because I was born into a multicultural family, because my mother was British, my father was Armenian, and the thing is about Armenians, they don't tend to intermarry with other cultures or other peoples. They tend to keep themselves to themselves, and they're often known as a unique genetic type because they haven't gone to other countries, colonized, met different peoples, and all these kind of things. They're quite unique, just like the Japanese. So for me, and my parents, was very unusual for them to intermarry. And because of the intermarrying, the mystery of marriage, for example, is that the child that is born within the family, when they've, the couple have married and they've tied the knot, basically tying the protection around the marriage. So the children that normally come usually are either from the mother's lineage or they're from the father's lineage. And in my case was that I came from my mother's lineage, which was the British or Brittonic lineage. And to be honest, I always felt more connected and tied to Britain. And I always saw that if there was ever a struggle, the struggle was here for me to help. But as it so happened, that dream was also tied into the idea of, sometimes the ancestors of my father's side would, how should I put it? They would, talk to one another and decide, okay, look, can we use your son or your child to speak and help us as well? Because in times of peril and things like this. So sometimes it works like this. So I'm helping the Armenian community this way. Also because I was also tied to the land ceremonially in a ceremony, in like on another level. Let's put it that way. So yeah, beginning when I got there, I was met at the airport with my wife, and we went to the hotel. It was all very lovely. And so what was happening, we went to places like Ararat, which was again a very high energy place. It was next to a village, and it was how should I put it? It was sort of, it was kind of like very primitive, buildings, but you could see it in the land. It wasn't so prominent, and there were high energy things, so you could actually take the stones there, and you really felt the energy of it. We took a bus ride on the way to Goris, but on the way we stopped off at Karahunj, which was Armenia's version of Stonehenge, as they call it. But actually, when you were at Karahunj, it was huge. It was monumentally huge. Stonehenge doesn't compare to Karahunj. I mean, Stonehenge is like one plateau, but there were dozens all around, you know, as far as the eye could see, of stone circles, stones and stones and stones. And even beyond that, there were what you could see in the actual hills, you know, far away, like a mile or so. There were actually pyramids that you could see the formation. And also, before we got there, also we also stopped off to have a look at a pyramid as well, which wasn't far from Yerevan. And so we went there in Karahunj. Like I said, it was absolutely amazing, and it was like very much like an astronomical observatory, because each of the stones had kind of like a hole that you could see through, and it pointed to a particular star, or it was at one access point. So that was amazing. And at that point we had we travelled on the following day. Once we got to Goris, we did also some archaic sites in Goris where there were primitive areas where you could go, and there was like sacred stones there which you could feel the energy from. And there was one particular one which looked like a capsule that you could go inside, but it was underneath a stone, and you could meditate under the stone, and you would start to see visions. And it was quite amazing, actually, because I saw like the vision of what happened in the last destruction, because, you know, the biblical flood, you know, people think of water, but what I saw was a biblical flood of fire, and it was just massive fire, you know, everywhere. And I saw the ancient buildings that were there in the time of Goris, and where it's kind of called the city of knowledge at that time, but it's completely underground now. It's, you know, but it needs a lot of excavating to find those things. Also, Goris Museum also had a little statue of, again, of that particular black alloy. It was a small, like literally like my hand, I can say about that much, in my hand, lion, but it was over 5 kilograms. You know, so when you're thinking of picking it because it's small, you think, oh, but you can't pick it up. Now, going back to the story of this black stone and not a stone, sorry, it was a black metal. Back in 1943, there was a gentleman called Arameus Garagilium. I'm sorry if I've said his name wrong, but it was in 1943 where there was rebuilding works going on in Yerevan, and where they were breaking through to dig underground, they found this huge, long, metallic pillar, and it was so heavy they couldn't get it up, you know, no matter what they tried. Also next to that pillar was a lamp with a lampshade on it, again made of the same metal, so heavy, but they managed to get that one. And somebody, just to test it, took a sledgehammer and went to smash it, but where the lampshade had this very thin metal that looked like glass, literally, it didn't smash the glass, so it literally ricocheted on the actual, you know, sledgehammer, and they couldn't break it. It didn't even scratch it. So those were the finds, and, you know, they were basically stored in the storerooms in the historical museum in Yerevan. But as you go into Yerevan Museum, you can actually see a bird in one of the glass cases, again made of that metal, so heavy. Again, don't know how it was fashioned, because the actual equipment to do that don't have it at the moment. So that was one of the things. So what happened then was that we went to Navarunk, to the 13th century monastery there, church, and we went into one of the chapels, and you see many of the churches in Armenia were basically built on top of sacred places, ancient sacred places of high energy. And we put our heads against one of the pillars there, and again you were feeling this energy surging through your body and feeling like as if you were going to have a vision, like you could see in your head, and which was amazing. And then the other time we went to Tatev Monastery. Now Tatev was an interesting place because it was actually one of the centres in Armenia of knowledge. And you see there in Tatev they also had the pillar that basically was on a hinge in a circle, and that stone pillar that you see in Tatev today, originally it was one of those big long black metallic pillars, the mysterious ones, that was on a hinge, and it would actually move like a dial, and it was one of these electromagnetic things that it just moves, going pointing to the cosmology in the sky. And on the 11th of August every year, the actual pillar itself points directly to the central belt of Orion, on the day of the actual new year for Armenia. So this is where the calendars were created in ancient Armenia. But the thing about Tatev was that it was actually that place was a very unique university. It taught people the 7 liberal sciences, which were grammar, logic, rhetoric, arithmetic, astronomy, music and geometry. Those were the main ones. And it existed until the 17th century, but you see the Vatican ordered the destruction of that place and the closure of that place. So the Vatican destroyed it basically because of the knowledge that it had. But still to this day, you can still see the astro architecture in the actual buildings. So you can see the inscriptions on the walls, the doors. So it still survived today of what the students or monks that were there that were learning. So it was a very interesting place to be. And then after that, which was incredible, because to get to Tatev, actually, you have to go on this, basically a wire cable car, basically, and it was going through these high mountains. And if you're anything like me when it comes to heights, it's quite daunting, let's say. But it was amazing, really, because the thing is with Armenia, they've got so many incredible mountains, and it's so high, and even the eagles just sitting on the actual ground, because it was so big. So anyway, we carried on our expedition. We went to Gani Temple, in the Kotyak province. On the way to visiting Gani, I was told the story that basically this place is a place where some of the villages, they have these kind of portal type of effects. So sometimes some of the houses end up in other places and they seem to move, so it's extraordinary, but it's something definitely for people to look into when they actually travel through there. But that said, my cousin lives in Yerevan, and my cousin and her husband were walking around near where they lived, and they seemed to be going back to the same place, and they don't know how they got there, so there is these extraordinary things, as if they travel through portals. Armenia is very much like that, And so we visited Ghani, which is a temple that is used for ceremonies, for traditionalists in Armenia to do their rituals, ceremonies that they do on special days, So there is this push to go back to the traditional ways in Armenia. Also, worth mentioning on the way there, Gerhard Medieval Monastery is also another place to go, because that place also has, I can say, again, around that monastery there are places where you can feel the energy and you can do meditation. But what's extraordinary is that actually through the entrance, and it's also something that's missed by a lot of people, but on the floor there's this like a circle with crystals underneath, and if you stand on top of that and you close your eyes, you get this feeling that you can actually see directly through to the next chapel, like through your head, which was extraordinary to see that, so it's sort of very much confirmed to me that, this place, Armenia, is very much a very sacred place, and a place of, spirituality, something that really expands your mind. And also, it's worth mentioning as well that it's a place of a place of resonance, because especially in the place of Siunik, is where you have a 0-point synchronization, where all the energies are unfolding, so through a synchronization of space and time on the planetary scale. So Armenia as a country itself has that, and very sacred places are also found like that in India. But you see a lot of Europeans, they think in terms of going to India for the expansion and learning spirituality and this, and often forget that actually many peoples in the past, they came from Armenia and they migrated west to Western Europe as we know today, not realizing it's their ancestral home, including the British. So it's a sacred home, sacred place for the ancestors, and it's worth looking into, because it has this extraordinary thing, and on an economic level, because it has these minerals that is very valuable, as well as minerals that are very unusual because they're not of this earth, like the metal alloys that I was talking about, is very much something that, Azerbaijan, is very much interested, hence going into places like Nagorno-Karabakh, giving all sorts of different reasons as to why they believe it's theirs. But the point being is that it's more to do with trying to get these specific type of metals and minerals and things like that to help enrich their country, enrich their land, and also help with the worldwide, I can say, worldwide, to do with the fourth industrial revolution. So a lot of these minerals have to be used for that, for the upcoming so-called the world order that they're imagining to themselves that they're going to create, and they need these kind of minerals. So it's very much to do with that. So that's another one way of looking at it, but there's another way of looking at it.